Conservatives are turning up the heat on their hateful rhetoric and going back to old disproven tropes in their effort to eliminate trans people entirely. In direct response to Aaron Reed's reporting that the right is on a campaign of genocide against trans people, Matt Walsh promised to continue the war against the community, and called Aaron out specifically in that continuation of the war. He quotes, "There's so much more to be done," finishing with, "So the battle continues." On top of the rhetoric of his colleagues and brethren in the crusade to eliminate trans people, including direct calls for violence and elimination, Pastor Mark Burns, who has called for execution of LGBT folks and criminal penalties, claiming penalties for parents of trans kids, claims there's no such thing as trans kids. There's only abusive parents. His rhetoric has been reflected in the Republican Party as leading figures parrot his points. The lie that there's no such thing as trans kids or trans people in general is also gaining popularity as a talking point during a hearing for a new bill in Montana seeking to rigidly define sex to exclude trans, non-binary, and medically intersex folks. Senator Brad Molnar claims trans people are quote-unquote fraudulent. Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh's colleague at the media outlet, used a few tropes in claiming that trans people are, quote, delusional, and he called for a, quote, ban of transgenderism entirely, stating that trans people, quote, are not a legitimate category of being and therefore cannot be the target of genocide. So his point is, and several of these people's points are like, we don't exist. We're not real. It's all a made up thing. We're delusional. Things that were all disproven many years, if not more than a decade ago, by the medical community, by strict scientific methods. And it's just easy. It's just low hanging, lame, easy attacks. It's very sad that somebody that people that have this much prominence and this much sway would resort to such old and tired things that have been completely disproven. Candace Owens, another talk show host on the Daily Wire, has taken to literally demonizing the community by calling trans people demonic and promoting violence against them, stating she'd beat her grandchild with a cane if they came out as trans. Just a lovely person. Then there are still some who are doing it a little more subtly. We reported here on the Transverse news about Charlie Kirk and his mafia-style calls for violence, saying that someone, quote, should just take care of it the way we used to take care of things back in the 1950s and 60s. Walsh isn't just a mouthpiece for hateful rhetoric calling for violence and elimination. His network has had a major influence on policy and opinions of members of the far right, and now even the not so far right. So we'll be talking a lot about Matt Walsh. You know, we try to stay away from talking about people like J.K. Rowling and Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, to a lesser degree. We try to not to talk about these same things over and over again too much, but these constant attacks from the Daily Wire and the constant elevation of those attacks and calls for specific violence and the elimination of our right to exist here in this country is something that we need to continually talk about. And poor Aaron for taking the brunt of this. There's always somebody out on the front lines in the trans community that is taking the brunt, that is the focus, that is the one being doxxed and having terrible things said about them, having attacks thrown at them, being threatened. And you know, Aaron's great reporting is now one of the latest that is under that microscope and that spotlight.